Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us for our Legacy Planning 101 discussion. Tonight, we're going to talk about something that impacts every single one of us: legacy planning. Now, you might hear that word and think it's only for people with great wealth or big estates, but that couldn't be further from the truth. Legacy planning is about making intentional choices now to protect your loved ones, share your values, and create a lasting impact on the people and causes you care about most. No matter your age, stage of life, or resources, you can have a legacy plan, and it's one of the most meaningful gifts that you can leave behind. So, tonight I'm joined with our subject matter experts. The first person I would like to introduce is Steve Trader from Pennsylvania Adult and Teen Challenge. Hi, Steve.
Hi, Marissa. Thank you. And welcome, everybody, whether you're watching this live or you've tuned in later in the week or two. Again, my name is Steve Trader, blessed to head up the advancement team at Pennsylvania Adult and Teen Challenge. I've been in the nonprofit world for quite a while, and I want to thank our friends at Faithward Advisors. I want to thank Bernie and Adrian for being here with us. We've had a long relationship with Faithward, and it's something that continues to grow. So thank you for tonight. We want tonight to be very informative, lessons learned about maybe your own legacy and estate planning opportunities. On the personal side, I'm blessed. My wife and I have two daughters, and we have three very little granddaughters all of a sudden. So we're blessed to be in a new season of life ourselves. So thank you and welcome.
Awesome. Thank you, Steve. Next up, we have Bernie from Faithward Advisors. Hi, Bernie.
Hey, Marissa, thank you. And thank you, Steve, for that introduction. It's been a privilege to be coming alongside Adult Teen Challenge all the years that we have and helping to support you. Bernie Bostwick, again, with Faithward Advisors, financial advisor and principal here at the firm. And what we do here is we actually come alongside of individuals. We help them to be the best stewards they can be of what the Lord has entrusted with them, to help them to grow those assets. But then something unique, we help them to give away what they have in a very tax efficient way. And by doing so, by giving to ministries and nonprofits, they're able to do more for their families. So that's been a great privilege for us. And on a side note, personal note, I'm married with two daughters. Like Steve, I follow the path of girls. My daughter has five daughters herself. So we have five granddaughters and two little Yorkies, which are also girls. So I'm surrounded by girls.
You are. A lot of girls. Well, thank you. It's a pleasure to have you, Bernie. Adrian, nice to have you this evening.
Thank you very much. Excited to participate. Aevitas Law is the planning and implementation arm for the Faithward family of companies. And we're based here in Pennsylvania, but we're also licensed to practice in New York, New Jersey, and Maryland. Practice for us really focuses on the creation of business and personal strategies to minimize tax exposure, maximize client wealth. And really, when we're looking at the stewards that we work with, how do we help them leave a lasting legacy? And so many of the people on our team, much like Faithward, are chartered advisors in philanthropy, certified kingdom advisors, and we work to really bring a holistic solution and holistic planning to those that we serve.
Well, that's excellent. Thank you so much. And thank you, everyone, for joining us tonight. So we're going to kick off with a few questions, and we encourage everyone that's tuning in, if you have a question for one of our panelists, shoot us a comment. We'll get that into the queue and have your questions answered. So first question, kind of soft one, this one. What is legacy planning? Bernie, this one's for you.
I think that's a really great question, and look at it kind of in two ways. Number one is we look at what the estate is. So what does a person do during their lifetime with what they have? And so it's being the best steward, again, of what they have in their financial planning and creating that estate that they have created. That might be, their homes or their brokerage accounts or whatever they have. But then again, as I had mentioned before, passing that along in a very tax efficient way. And the legacy aspect of that is, what is that impact that they make, the fingerprint that they are going to leave behind whenever they pass away?
That's really interesting. And we've kind of talked about how this is something that anyone could access. So even if they have a big estate or if they, have smaller means, you're saying that anyone could have a legacy impact and plan.
I think people should just go back and look at exactly what it is that they have. And I think when you sit there and you add it up, even if you don't think that you have a lot, you're going to find that you have a lot more than what you do. And depending on what type of asset that you have, they can be taxed pretty bad at the time of death. And so if you take some of those assets and you pass those along to ministries and bless them, rather than blessing, if you would, the government, it's a good thing to do.
That's great. Well, thank you. So this next question is going to be for Steve. As a nonprofit, Steve, how has legacy planning supported your mission?
Now, that's a great question, and I'll keep it brief, but I could go on with all kinds of stories and testimonies and examples. But Teen Challenge is an organization is over 60 years, and we've had multiple generations that have stepped back and said, hey, I want to make a difference, and given major estate gifts and major planned gifts. And those gifts are what really helps us accelerate new programs, new geographies, new demographics, new areas of ministry. We don't ever use any estate planning gifts or anything special that's come from a planned giving opportunity for general operations. These are always tied to major expansions, tied to moving our ministries forward, tied to, again, moving into new parts, and I'll go into that later with different questions. But it's really used to further our ministry and really create new opportunities to reach those that are struggling with substance use disorders.
That's great. Thank you. So you're saying essentially, in general, this one is for Pennsylvania Adult and Teen Challenge, but any nonprofit could benefit from a legacy planning.
Oh yeah, I mean, as someone looking at that season of life and saying it's time for my wife and I to start squaring that away, we reach out to folks like Bernie and Adrian, not just for our Teen Challenge, but for our own personal opportunities to leave a legacy. But I do know, with respect to our ministry, planned giving, legacy giving has been crucial for the growth we've had over the last 60 years.
Wow, that's great. Well, thank you for sharing that. We're going to come back to you with that too. I think one of the things some of the viewers would like to know is, how do you make that tangible? What exactly has estate planning or legacy plans in the past enabled your organization to do? So we'll come back to that. But now I have a question for Bernie, actually. So Bernie, what do you think is the biggest misconception individuals have about estate planning or leaving a legacy?
Marissa, I think it goes right back to what you were saying before regarding people and thinking what they have. So many people think, well, I really don't have anything. I'm not wealthy. I don't have a big estate, so I don't really have to concentrate on that. If you're savvy enough, you would realize that to have an estate tax, you would, if you have anything, it's $13.5 million. You don't, anything under that, you don't have to pay an estate tax for. So they just kind of brush it aside and they don't do anything with that. But the truth of the matter is it depends on what you own. And everybody owns things like retirement accounts and they have brokerage accounts and so forth, and they get taxed differently whenever you pass away. And so it doesn't matter how big the estate is. As an example, if someone has an IRA as an example, whenever they would pass away, if they're going to give that to their after their spouse, their children ends up getting paid an income tax. They're having to pay an income tax on that IRA, which could be quite high. But if they took that IRA as an example and they gave that to a ministry and then had something else for wealth replacement for the children, it's much more effective for them. So I think the key right there is the misconception is my estate's not big enough. And the truth of the matter is, it doesn't matter how big your estate is. There is something you could and probably should do, not only for the ministries, but also for your family.
That's great. Well, I think that's really comforting for people to know that might have that misconception that they can't do anything at this point. But you're saying they can. So thank you. Adrian, so a question for you. How can an individual structure their estate plan to ensure assets go exactly where they want? And kind of, we're looking, how do we avoid family disputes or complications? We all hear those horror stories about families arguing at the end of a loved one's life. So what do you guys do in order to make sure it's simple, clear, and there's no fighting?
Yeah, it's a great question. And it's one that we hear very often, especially when we have the next generation that oftentimes, family members don't necessarily see eye to eye. And We all know that when generation one or the parents, pass on, oftentimes there's a void there. It could be a power struggle of, for making decisions, or it could be, just a family animosity, seeds that were sown in the past that now, unfortunately, kind of come home to roost. And so when we're looking at, an overarching plan, we talk about three primary challenges to leaving a lasting legacy. The first one, and Bernie hit on it a moment ago, is taxes. So understanding what you have and understanding how it's going to be taxed will help ensure things go where you want it to go. The second challenge is long-term illness. We're finding that for the what I would call mass affluent, people between $250,000 and $2.5 million of net worth, this challenge is becoming the single biggest because costs are so expensive and it can really eat into a nest egg very quickly. But the last challenge is the one that deals with the subject at hand here, which is communication or lack of communication. You must ensure not only that the documents get in place, powers of attorney, wills, trusts, and there's a bunch of tools that can be utilized based on everyone's individualized situation, but you have to communicate. You need to make sure that you're letting people know. Bernie mentioned this idea of your fingerprint when you're not here anymore. Those time-honored traditions, those values, the things that you want to have happen, that communication has to happen, not just in written form in the documents, but also getting everyone around the table and explaining what is important, why it's important, and what you want to have happen.
That's a really good point. I don't know. I mean, do you find with the people that you're working with, do they tend to have those conversations, or is that something that you have to?
Yeah, we very much stress the notion of having family conversation. In central Pennsylvania, things are about as close to the vest as they can be between families, especially when it comes to finances. But, it's important to do. And what we'll do oftentimes after we get done with an estate plan that gets executed is we will offer to the family to have a family meeting at the office to say, hey, if you want your power of attorney, the people who are going to be those fiduciaries, your family members, to kind of get around the table and us walk them through what the plan says, we'll happily do that for you to make sure that we've got at least that first touch of communication.
Adrian, if you don't mind, share the example. You and I had a family meeting like that with some folks in central Pennsylvania that owned a farm, and how that could have turned into something very bad, if you remember that.
To be frank, I don't remember it, but I can.
We were meeting with a family, and it was a daughter and a son. And the son was inheriting the farm, and the daughter was coming from outside of the state. And when they got together, the parents put the estate plan together with Adrian, and legacy plan, thought it was going to be perfect, and the daughter was going to be happy with how it worked out because she's not working the farm. And it could have been an extremely disastrous situation because it's not what she wanted at all. And what the family wanted to make sure of is that everything was in place. So whenever they did pass away, there would be harmony between the brother and the sister. And so that gave them an opportunity for Adrian to go back and redo that estate plan again, the legacy planning again. So whenever it came to be, there would not be any problems. So I think I agree totally by watching what Adrian and his team does. It is extremely important to have that family meeting.
Yeah, I think the clarity and the transparency, just to get everyone on the same page, the last thing you want when you're losing a loved one is to have internal struggle and strife within a family unit. So that brings up a question. This actually is not on our list of questions, but how often or how frequently can you change a legacy plan?
Well, as Bernie mentioned earlier, there's multiple aspects of a legacy plan. So you've got your financial stewardship components, it's beneficiary designations, it's titling of assets, and each one of those have different powers in the overall legacy plan. But with regard to your communication, your dispositive documents, your will, your trust, your living documents like your power of attorney, you theoretically can change them daily if you want to. What we'll tell people is that it's important to look at them and review them anytime there's a major life change. Whether it's maybe you have a child, and you didn't have one before, maybe someone who is named to serve in your documents goes home to be with the Lord. We need to figure out who's going to be the backups. We need to change them then. Or if you've just had changes in what you have or where you want things to go, it's important to review them then. But flexibility is key. And a lot of the different documents and changes, whether it's a beneficiary designation or a will, do take certain processes to get done. So it's important to know what you have and know where it's pointing.
That's great. Thank you. That leads me to another question. So I think we've kind of talked about estate planning is for anyone and everyone. When would you suggest, Bernie, this question's for you. When would you suggest someone who's unsure is kind of considering estate and legacy planning, but not quite sure if they're old enough, if they should wait, if they have their, assets ready? What would you say to someone who might be unsure about starting a legacy plan?
Yeah, I think there's a couple things to look at. Number one, you just have to take a personal inventory again of what you have. And again, notice that you probably have things and items that are greater than what you might have thought. And then you want to consider your family, and you want to consider the ministries and nonprofits that are close to your heart, and what that fingerprint, as I mentioned before, will end up being. So ask yourself the question, how important is it to ensure that your family and your nonprofits get as much as what you have now instead of going to pay taxes? We say there's three groups of people you can leave your assets to when you pass away. You can leave it to your family, you can leave it to the nonprofit you love, or you can leave it to Uncle Sam. You can pick the two out of the three while you're still alive. No one knows exactly whenever we're going to pass away. So it's important. It doesn't matter how old you are to start looking at things and considering, hey, today may be the last day. So is everything in order? Is everything going to pass the way I want it to pass?
And I think too, for like, I'm in my 40s, I have 4 kids. I think starting to consider that, because you're right, we don't know when our last day is. So just a follow-up question to that, what would be the first kind of course of action if someone was interested in starting a legacy plan? What would they do?
Again, it would be first to find out exactly what their needs are. Find out, when you're looking at things, how are they managing what they already have? Are they getting the optimum out of the investments that they have to grow? And then we do what's called a death tax analysis when we end up doing everything, to find out from a tax position, how are things passing? What is it that needs to be changed in that would make it more efficient regarding the taxes, so you could pass more on to the nonprofits and the family.
That's great. So someone could contact you or someone at Faithward Advisors, and they could kind of go through that process.
We do that as a team. We get together. We have here at Faithward, we have a financial strategies team, and we bring everything to them, and then they communicate not only with wealth management, but they communicate with Adrian and his team at Aevitas Law to pull everything together to make sure, again, that they have the best plan for them. Again, what we look to do, and I'll just say this, we look to glorify God. And by doing that, we do the best we can by making sure that they're doing everything the best way that they can do it.
That's beautiful. I love that. We're going to switch it back to Steve. Steve, so you had your first question. Your follow-up to that is, have you had, that you could share with us, someone that has left Pennsylvania Adult and Teen Challenge in their will, left a legacy, and what have you been able to accomplish with gifts like that?
Yeah, absolutely. We have a number of examples. We have, if you came to the main campus, parked in front of Wilkerson Hall and walked up the street, we could show you the women's expansion, the long-term expansion for women. We could show you our men's and women's detox center. We could show some of the short-term areas that have grown. We can show remodeling to Wilkerson Hall. There's so many examples that we could do that. And people do come back years after sometimes, and they'd like to see, what their grandparents or what their parents left to the organization. I've got a really good friend who's lost a very close family member in Philadelphia. And they've just recently seen, the last year or two, with our work in Kensington, where we've really partnered with the city of Philadelphia and other ministries down there. And we've opened up our own center, resource center, crisis center on Frankfurt Avenue. We partner with the Rock Ministries, and they've seen what we're doing there. And they've come to me and said, hey, we'd like to look at a legacy gift to honor our lost loved one who unfortunately didn't survive substance use disorders on the streets of Philadelphia. Yeah. So we've got quite a few examples, and it's not super unusual for a family or a loved one to want to come back and see what the funds from their generational estate has done for the organization.
Absolutely. I think there was a story, that I've heard through the grapevine. The woman
Yeah.
whose father donated the farm for Pennsylvania Adult
Yeah. Yeah. It goes
and
way
she
back.
was coming back and
Yeah.
walking the campus and was just amazed at what was, what we
Yeah.
were.
I mean, that's probably, Marissa, our first legacy gift, and it's probably 55 years ago. But she came back with her brother, and I was blessed to be on campus. And our president, Chris McFadden, was there, and a few of us got to meet the daughter and son and walk around, and they showed us, this is where we used to live, this is where somebody got married, and it was just amazing. But that really was one of our very first legacy gifts. And it doesn't always come in the form of finances. It comes in the form of land and property, and we're just really blessed. This is a real core competency for us, this area of estate planning, giving, and legacy giving.
That's so cool. I think that was one of my favorite stories of just how Pennsylvania Adult and Teen Challenge, Teen Challenge started in New York City, and then Wilkerson and Raresburg, the farm that has become kind of the centerpiece of Teen Challenge, was donated. So I think that's such an incredible story.
Yeah.
All right, we're kicking things off to Adrian. So Adrian, question for you. What key things should someone know before writing or updating their will?
Yeah, so when we talk about writing or updating a will, and I make it a little broader than that, when we're writing any of these key legacy documents, a lot of it comes down to, as we said time and time again, not only understanding what you have, but I think the more important factor here, especially if you want to ensure that it's going to go according to your wishes, is to understand the who. When I say the who, we're talking about the notion of the fiduciary that is going to be stepping into your shoes. So in the event of a disability or a long-term illness or an incapacitation, that who is going to be your agent or your attorney, in fact, for the power of attorney document. When we get to the will or the trust, that who is going to be your executor or your trustee. I will oftentimes make the analogous reference to a relay race. And we keep talking about this legacy, the physical legacy and the values. Think of that like your baton. And right now you're running the first leg of a relay race. And if you're in an accident and you have incapacitation, you're going to be handing that baton off to somebody. Now, hopefully they hand that baton back, which would be a little different than a normal relay race. But if they don't, then that baton is going to end up being handed off to someone else. That someone else is going to be that executor or trustee. And eventually that baton, which is your legacy, is going to go to the next generation, your beneficiaries. But when you're picking a fiduciary, and why this is so important, there are three key characteristics. First characteristic is you want to ensure that fiduciary, the who, shares your values. This is most important because in today's day and age, we can hire the expertise, we can hire the knowledge, we can do all the other stuff, but you want to make sure that when a decision is made, this person is making a decision just as you would because they share your values. Second important characteristic is knowledge. Of course, you have someone who shares your values and has a head on their shoulders, that's even better. And then lastly, you've got this idea of proximity, especially in the event of a incapacitation where something needs to be done quick. It's great to have boots on the ground, but proximity is not nearly as important as it used to be. So when we're talking about, what do you need to know? What do you need to think about before you start this journey? Really thinking about those fiduciaries. Who do you trust? Who do you want to be stepping into your shoes? And understanding that it's not just a one person situation, but rather maybe two or three are working together, or one person with a successor. You've got lots of different options there, but the fiduciary choosing is oftentimes the most important to making sure that the wishes are followed through in a way that you wanted them to be.
No, that's great. I would never have even thought of that. So that's a great answer. Bernie, so question for you. What financial planning strategies can help individuals reduce taxes while still providing for both family and causes that they care about?
I think that's a good question, Marissa, but I divide that up two ways. One is while you're alive, and then the other one is when you pass away. Because again, we want to be the most optimum stewards that we can be today. And so, while we're alive, as I had mentioned before, we have retirement accounts, and we should have retirement accounts. And putting money inside of retirement accounts can have great tax advantages. If you put them inside of a traditional IRA or your traditional 401k, you have tax deductions. If you use a Roth, then you get tax deductions later, but those are very, again, beneficial for your family because, again, what you're doing is you're working in a way that you're making sure that you're having more to work with as far as the money goes. You got to, consider you're giving to your church, your cherished nonprofits. So again, if you're looking at your taxes, we are all giving and desiring to give to ministries, like Pennsylvania area Adult Teen Challenge. We want to give there. We want to give to the church. By giving there, again, you get a tax advantage. So it's who do you want to give that money to? So again, that's things that you can do while you're alive. If you're in your 70s and you're getting ready to take, or you're taking your required minimal distribution, rather than taking a required minimal distribution, if you're giving, you can actually change that, what's called an RMD, required minimal distribution, to a QCD, or qualified charitable distribution. And by doing that, when you take your RMD, you have to pay income tax on that. But if you make it a QCD, a qualified charitable distribution, and again, you give it to a Teen Challenge, or you're giving it to your church, you don't have to pay taxes on that. It's not income tax, so you don't have to pay it. So that's wonderful ways to do that as well. Then when you're retired, you're looking for ways that you're taking your money and where you're taking your money from, and you're trying to kick the tax can down the road as long as you possibly can, because those become great assets to give whenever you pass away. So again, going back to when you pass away, you have IRAs. What's the best way to give those? You want to reduce the taxes, the federal taxes, the state taxes that you have to pay when you pass away. Some of those things, like a retirement account that would go to children that you're going to pay income tax on, if you give those, again, to a ministry that you love or your church, that's not going to be taxable. So again, by doing that and finding something like what we call a life insurance policy, survivorship life insurance policy that you give to your kids that they don't pay taxes on, to replace that, that's awesome ways to be able to grow your estate and cut down on the taxes that you have to pay.
That's great. And I think I've spoken to many people that when they're kind of figuring out end of life where their estate and financiers are going to go, looking to give the least amount to the government and invest the most into family and causes that really stir their heart. So,
and I think what's important about that, Marissa, not to interrupt you, but so many times when we say things like that, people might be under the impression that we're trying to do something against the government, but the government gives us these tools to be able to do this. It's just that people don't utilize those tools. And that's what we do here. That's what Aevitas Law does. That's what we do at Faithward Advisors, is we educate people. We show people how to best do that and use those tools that the government gives us the ability to use.
That's great. And I think you're right. There's a lot of people that don't know that. And that's why working with someone like Faithward Advisors comes in very helpful, because you might not know these things, but your financial advisor does. So that's great. Steve, question for you. We're talking about legacy gifts. If you could kind of sum up, what do you think the most pressing long-term needs are that legacy gifts could help with? So if someone's thinking of donating to their favorite nonprofit, what are some things that a legacy gift could completely change for an organization?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. It's another one. There would be countless examples, but it's growth and expansion. Right now, we cannot keep up. We don't, in many of our areas or programs, we don't have enough beds. A big movement within our ministry, if you will, is recovery housing. We have people that'll come through our detox, our short-term, graduate our program, and they need recovery housing. They're not ready to go back into where they grew up or back with their family. So we've got a real demand in the Lancaster area, in Western Pennsylvania, especially, to open up recovery houses. We continue to need additional long-term bed space. Our expansion into Philadelphia is really just the tip of the iceberg. We've really see that as an area of continued growth and expansion. Westmoreland County, the Pittsburgh area. We've expanded now to Delaware with intensive outpatient and outpatient services. And again, all these areas are growing beyond our capacity. And we we use the funds from legacy gifts, from estate plans, to help accelerate that growth and accelerate those projects. And it's not uncommon for someone to tragically have lost a loved one, and for them to come to us and say, when you're ready to build in this area or open up something in this area, talk to us, because we'd like to help. And lastly, unfortunately, the area of substance use disorder impacts every family, and it's something that we're just trying to lay out every option that's possible.
Absolutely. And I think you're able to serve more people through those gifts too.
Absolutely.
Just like the work that you guys do in Kensington and in Harrisburg. I mean, Pennsylvania in general has such a significant substance use disorder issue. It just allows to serve more.
Yes.
We do have an audience question, our first one. So exciting. So Rosemary Sullivan said, who do we notify that we have left a legacy? So who should be notified during those cases? Whoever wants to take it. Oh, wait, Steve, I think you're muted. You are muted.
Thank you. Sorry about that. No, I know Bernie and Adrian work with people all the time. I know Rosemary is a great question. People will come to us. They may have their own financial planner, and they may also have their own will, but they still want to find out how they can give to the ministry. And one of our advancement team is always willing to sit down with them and talk to them and meet with them and tell them about the growth of the organization. And of course, if they need financial planning resources or they need legal resources, we're going to turn right to our friends at Faithward and talk to them.
That's great. And I think that too, we've had different situations where someone might put an organization in their legacy plan, but not potentially tell them. So I know that's come up on our end, that we've seen that. Bernie and Adrian, is there ever discussion within your meetings with individuals where you do notify the nonprofits that are left in a legacy, or do you leave that to the individuals to have that discussion with them?
I'll just answer from my side, and Adrian, please come in. That's all going to be dependent on the person that we're meeting with. If they give us the permission to do that, we will share that with the nonprofit. But there are people that we talk to that, again, they don't necessarily want the left hand to know what the right hand is doing, and they would rather it be kept confidential. So it is all dependent on the individual that we're working with.
Okay.
Adrian?
No, I concur. I mean, it's a personal choice. It's a very much of a private matter in many instances for a lot of the ministries, that we work with. If they're doing a planned giving campaign, they're building perhaps an endowment for long-term sustainability, and they are bringing a donor to us. Part of the ask would be that that we would be able to let the ministry, like Teen Challenge, know, okay, so we have this coming, and here's the intent for it. So it is a personal decision. It's never anything that happens automatically, but oftentimes it helps with long-term budgeting and the like. So we encourage it when it's possible.
Great. Well, those are great answers. Thank you. Next question is for Adrian. So Adrian, what's a common mistake you see people make in their estate planning, and how can it be avoided?
Yeah, the single biggest mistake in estate planning that I see is people going to an attorney and saying that they've got a heart for charity and ministry, and having the attorney put a percentage of their probate estate inside their will. And the reason that this is a mistake goes back to what we've been talking about, which is understanding what you have. Bernie several times talked about the fact that different assets are taxed differently at death. For the vast majority of people that we come into contact with, they have some sort of pre-tax retirement vehicle, be it a 401k, a 403b, an IRA. And we understand that those assets are going to be taxed at least twice at death, at the state rate as well as at the federal rate. Giving those same assets to charity or ministry equals zero tax, because of course charities and ministries pay no tax. So when we sit down and I'm reviewing someone's estate plan and they've got a 10% or 20 or 50% slug inside their residue of their estate to go to ministry, my immediate question is, do you have a retirement plan asset? And then it takes a step back, and we will oftentimes use visualization. And I'll say, Marissa, imagine everything you have is a pie. And what's your favorite flavor of pie? That's not a rhetorical question. What's your favorite pie?
Pecan.
Pecan. All right. So we got this big pecan pie, and that's everything you've been blessed with. Maybe it's a house, maybe it's a bank account, maybe it's an IRA, maybe it's other things that are here. I want you to think about what piece or what size of piece, percentage-wise, you want to go to your family, your children, perhaps, to the ministries you want to support. And maybe there's 5 different ministries. And what we're going to do is we're going to put together a plan so that we can give that best piece from the best asset. And so if you say, listen, I had a 10% piece in my will to go to ministries, and you've got a retirement plan asset, we're going to look at that retirement plan asset and say, listen, let's give a percentage of that equals to 10% of the overall pie, and let's get it out of your will, because the stuff that flows through your will is only going to be subject to Pennsylvania inheritance tax, which is 4.5%. It's a significant win from a standpoint of giving assets and having the tax man take less in the overall arching equation.
Wow, that's great to know. And I'm sure people have made that mistake, unfortunately, in the past, just because they weren't aware of that. So next question, Bernie, can you share an example of how a thoughtful estate plan provided security or lasting impact for a family?
When you ask that question, I think of one in particular. It was an older couple, and the older couple was from the New Jersey area, and years ago they had bought a second property that they were using to rent, and their desire was to always give that home to ministry whenever they would pass away. But it had grown, because they bought it so many years ago, it had grown in value. I mean, it went from like $40,000 in the day to like over $500,000. So they had a huge capital gains exposure. But they were at the point now where they really needed to, sell that home, but they knew the capital gains tax. So what could they do about that? So, again, working with Aevitas, we created what's called a charitable remainder trust, which is an irrevocable trust. So what you put into that trust, you can't take the principal of it back out, but there are benefits because you do that, and I'll explain that in a moment. So what we did is we showed them that, and they were getting let me back up and say they were getting an income from that home of about $1,200 a month, and that income was still important for them. So what we recommended is they would take that deed and they would put that deed inside of that trust, that charitable remainder trust, and then the home would sell while it's inside of that trust. And because it was inside of that irrevocable trust when it sold, then they did not have to pay the capital gains tax on that. So that was the first benefit for doing that. But then to replace that income that they had on a charitable remainder trust, now they were able to get an income. They couldn't take the principal out, but they could get an income for it. So now they were able to get an income, and their income was actually $2,000 a month and not $1,200 a month that they were getting from their renters. So they've avoided capital gains. They provided an income for themselves. The extra money that they had from the income, they were actually giving it back to the ministry. They get a tax deduction for doing that. So they got a 5-year carryover tax deduction on that property that they used. And then after that, they got the income from that, and they would use that extra money that they were given, that tax deduction, to help offset that. Now, since that time, the senior has passed away, and now it is just his spouse that is alive. So now she gets that money, and she also gets other pension money. And the beautiful thing is the ministries are getting that income from that. So now how it blessed the family is they didn't have to pay the capital gains tax. She got an income for the rest of her life. She got a tax deduction, and she got an income, and that income now is going back to bless the ministry. So it was a win-win.
I was going to say, that's a win for sure.
And that's just one small example. And Steve, you kept saying, boy, I could think of all of these examples and stories. We could do the same thing too, but that's one that just popped out at me right away.
I love that. And I love that she's taking care, because you think as you get older, if a spouse passes away, there's no real way, like, do you go back to work or what's the financial situation? So to have that security, I feel like just gives a little bit more peace to the
Right.
family to know that she's taken care of. So that's beautiful. Okay. This is a good one. So this is for Adrian. What steps can individuals take now? And we talked about it a little bit, but if we could really get into it, what steps can individuals take now to make the estate planning process as simple and stress-free as possible for their heirs later?
Yeah, it's a good one. It's a relatively simple answer, though. So, it's kind of 3 steps.
Yep.
Get organized,
Mhm.
all right? Get professional guidance, and get talking. And that last piece here gets to that communication component. So obviously getting organized, we need to understand what you have.
Mhm.
When you're coming in and sitting down with any trusted professional, they need to be asking, open-ended questions about what you want to accomplish, what your goals and objectives are, and really getting under the hood on all the things that you have working for you and how they're titled so that we can organize them properly. And that's where that professional guidance comes in, because as I mentioned before, that single biggest mistake we find is oftentimes because someone goes to their one trusted professional, an attorney that perhaps does estate planning, but maybe is not taking I'll say a concerted or a holistic look at things, and it becomes a matter of simply throwing the charity in the will.
Mhm.
We didn't have all the information, so you made a recommendation on the information you had. So if you weren't organized to begin with, the recommendation you're going to get is oftentimes not going to be as holistic as it could be. And then lastly, it comes down to communication. You got to make sure the documents are done, the documents say what you want them to say, and then ensure, again, that you are communicating with the next generation on what you want to have happen. If you're incapacitated, what do you want to have happen with regard to your final moments from a standpoint of a living will? Do you want to donate your organs? Anatomical gifting is a thing that we can do in Pennsylvania now too through this. So a lot of these pieces are all communication driven. But again, organized, professional advice, and then get to talking after that.
That's great. Thank you. Steve, question for you.
Mhm.
So you work really closely with donors. You
Mhm.
have a good understanding of their why. So do you have a good idea of why people leave legacy gifts to ministry? Like, have you
Mhm.
had any interactions where someone has donated and what their reason behind that would be?
Mhm. Yeah, quite a few again, but a couple that come to mind, Marissa, is we had a family, a husband and wife, that were very strong donors of the ministry, and the wife, unfortunately, a few years back, passed away, and the husband and their children um, opened up a legacy opportunity, a special gift for us, and then we tied it to a scholarship. So not only was their gift powerful, but then it became this matching initiative. And the advancement team really rallied around that and turned that great legacy gift in honor of the spouse or the wife into something even stronger. And it's still living to this day because the donor is active. He wants to see what's happening on the campus. He wants to see the new areas that we're growing in. And now we can show him when he comes up on campus and we have lunch and we walk around and he has this living example of his wife.
Oh,
Um, and that type of thing is powerful, and we very sensitive. We don't, do anything. We understand that what that means to them. And then I'll go back to it again because it's so prevalent. But my own family, we've lost very close loved ones to substance use tragedies, and I've been working with my family on gifts to remind them and kind of prevent what happened in their family maybe from happening to somebody else.
yeah.
And we create this scholarship fund, and if they're comfortable with it, the person's name is tied to it, and they can have this, again, what I'll call cautiously a living legacy, a living gift that keeps getting replenished, that all started with that one estate planning gift. And it can turn into a scholarship. It can turn into an annual campaign. It can turn into something that really has legs. And sometimes it's tied to churches because we have tremendous church support still.
Mm.
And a lot of that layers right into that as well.
Well, thank you. It's nice to see someone's legacy living on through the work that is done. So another question, this one is for Adrian. Beyond a simple will, what legal tools like trusts, beneficiary designations, or powers of attorney can strengthen an estate or legacy plan?
Now we're getting into the interesting stuff.
Yes.
So how much time do we have left? No, just kidding. So let's talk about some important factors to understand as we think about your legacy and how things are structured. The first piece is understanding the hierarchy with regard to the things that you have and the estate settlement process. So there are 3 layers. The first layer, when we talk about the assets that someone might have and how they go to the next generation or to the next person, is titling. So a great example is a bank account or a home. Oftentimes a husband and wife own those jointly with a right of survivorship. And that right of survivorship is a title. It's a legal title. And because it's a legal title, it doesn't matter what anything else says. It doesn't matter what your will says. It doesn't matter what anything else comes about and says. At death, when the first person goes, the second person's getting it. So titling trumps everything when it comes to how things are structured. The second in the order of priority is contractual obligation, also known as beneficiary designations. So life insurance, IRAs, annuities, these companies have contractual obligations with the person who set up the account to pay whoever is named as the beneficiary. So again, if one person says in their will, I want my IRA to go here, there, or someplace else, and the beneficiary designation says something else wins, because the contractual obligation trumps what is written inside the will. At the end of the day, the will, or I'll get into in a moment, the trust, is the low man on the totem pole with regard to how assets flow. That residuary component, everything, think of like residue, the little slime at the bottom, it all kind of boils down. And that's what the will deals with, is this residue. And a will is a great way to do things, but a will subjects you to probate. So probate is defined as the process of proving your will. That's what probate means. Now, probate gets a bad rap. In Pennsylvania, it is not bad at all, but it is still a public process in which your original death certificate and your original will go to the courthouse. Your executor, oftentimes with the attorney, goes there and gets the process of probate started. And then that executor is now given the authority to begin to pull together the assets to get them to a beneficiary. Works great in most states. But when you run into a situation where you've got property, real estate typically, in multiple states, and we have a lot of snowbirds here, you now run into a situation where you have to probate the will in every state in which you have real estate. It's called ancillary probate. And this can oftentimes become expensive because you have to hire counsel in the other state, and it can become more time consuming. So when we talk about other vehicles like a trust, for instance, a trust, like a company, is a separate entity. Because it's a separate entity and doesn't have a pulse like we do, it doesn't have to die. Because it doesn't die, it doesn't have to go through probate. And as such, it can streamline the process of getting assets to the next generation. So a lot of people say, hey, I got to get a trust. I need a trust. I need a trust. Oftentimes, that's not the case, though. Again, probate, not bad in Pennsylvania. It does nothing different from a will. A trust, a regular revocable living trust, does nothing different than a will. You still have to pay taxes like inheritance taxes. It's still subject to your creditors. You still file the same income tax returns. But what it does do is it provides a little layer of streamlining the process so that if you have property in multiple states, or if you have a lot of complex assets, you can ensure that your successor trustees, which are the equivalent of an executor, can step in and continue to run things smoothly. So that was the Reader's Digest version, but it gives you a good idea of kind of the things that can be used.
Yeah, no, that's great. So we are coming to a close, guys. This has been such a great discussion. I have one more question, and then we're going to go into final thoughts. So this is up to anyone, and I think all 3 of you, this could be applicable, so you tell me. But what kind of assets are you seeing most often as legacy gifts? Steve, I know we were talking about a farm that was donated.
Mm-hmm.
So what are you seeing?
Sometimes we see vehicles, we see basic tools, lawn tractors, things like that are given, especially if there's been a big estate and the parents perhaps had a farm. But the bulk of them are financial gifts. And again, we do see automobiles, we do see equipment, we do see houses. We've been given houses before. and property. And again, Bertie and Adrian deal with the dotting the I's and crossing the T's on all these type of things. But we've been blessed to see many real variety. But I would say the bulk of them to this time are still financial.
And I'll chime in here because I think, you talked about the idea of a house, financial assets. And what I see most, because I oftentimes have people who really want to have an impactful plan put in place before they have a liquidity event. So they may have a large concentrated position of stock. They may have a business that they're about to sell. They may have a farm. They may have a house. What's important to understand is that if you do your giving before the liquidity event, before the sale of that asset, what you give provides two tax advantages. And Bernie mentioned it before. One is you don't pay any tax on that portion that you give because you don't own it at the time of sale. The ministry does. And secondarily, you get an income tax deduction for the fair market value of what you gave away. So it can help you offset tax on the part you keep, because it's not an all or nothing equation. And this is important to understand. You can give 10% of a house. You can give 50% of a farm. You don't have to give the whole thing. And you can back into the numbers that give you the liquidity that you need to be able to live on and have that financial independence, but still bless ministries in a tax efficient way. So that's a lot of what we see today.
That is great to know.
Nothing to add.
I was gonna say, most interesting legacy gift that either of you have seen. We got a farm. That's a hard one to top. No?
No, I can't think of.
That's okay.
No.
Well, thank you everyone for joining us tonight. Panelists, thank you so much for being on here and for your wisdom and discernment through all of these very challenging questions. I've learned a lot. Any final words or thoughts?
I'll just close with this from our side, Marissa. We're, on track to reach between 2,000 and 3,000 patients or students or clients, depending on what terminology one likes to use. And this year at one of our 18 locations. And we just continue to grow, and we are, as a ministry, as an organization, the gifts that we get through legacy gifts and through major donor contributions is still a huge part of what we do. And again, it's not used to pay utilities. It's not used to run the operation. It's used to expand, reach very difficult parts of Pennsylvania and Delaware. And it's very impactful. So I would encourage anybody who has any questions, and would like to know a little bit more about where would possibly a legacy gift be used, please talk to one of our folks on the advancement team, have a cup of coffee, come visit one of the locations, and we'll definitely show them areas where there's need, areas where there's potential growth, and areas where God is helping us make a huge difference.
Gentlemen, any final thoughts? We do have one question that just came in. Are you guys up for one more question?
Sure.
Yeah. Okay. So here we go. From Beth Fisher Bostwick. I've heard about a donor advised fund. Is this something my family should consider, or do I need to seek a foundation for this?
Adrian, I'll let you answer that.
All right. So donor advised fund. So this is an awesome concept. It's one that we like so much that we actually formed a public foundation to offer to donors to be able to take advantage of on a more regular basis. The donor advised fund is very akin to a family foundation. So it does a lot of things well. The first thing it does is it provides for an opportunity for intergenerational stewardship. So when we look at putting money into something for a scholarship or for blessing multiple ministries over as many years as someone would like, the donor advised fund fits the bill. The donor advised fund has become very popular because of the fact that you have a lot of people, again, selling a business, selling a home, and they may say, listen, I've got 2 or 3 ministries I want to bless. I don't know that I want to do one big lump sum, but rather I'd like to continue my giving. And I want to teach my kids or my grandchildren why I give to these ministries and how I give to these ministries. The donor advised fund gives the family the opportunity to put together a family mission statement, put together a purpose clause, talk about the ministries it blesses. And now this is part of that legacy. I talked about communication multiple times tonight. This is one of those last pieces that when someone really wants to leave a lasting impact, setting up that donor advised fund now can have the family get around the Thanksgiving table and say, listen, we've got $100,000 here that we want to give out to various ministries. Let's talk about who everyone wants to bless, why they want to bless them, and then let's come to an agreement on how we're going to do this. So the donor advised fund provides all the tax benefits that we've talked about with traditional giving, but it allows a pool to be set up so that the family can give at as much or as little as they want for future years, for as long as the Lord tarries.
I love that. I love having a mission statement for your giving and then passing that on.
Very powerful.
So important. That's great. All right. Well, that was our last question. If no one has any final comments, we are going to end this live stream and just thank everyone for tuning in and asking your questions and learning more about legacy planning. All right. Have a good night.
Thank you very much. Good night.
Thank you.